Do you drive a 24-inch lifted mullet wagon wobbly pile of garbage with 50-inch tyres and a 6-inch shifter extension on your automatic Pajero?
Oh mate, but it makes it fully sick and hectic off-road.
No, it doesn't. But if you love this and hate this,
is the car turbocharged?
then this is definitely the video you should watch. So, modified vehicles. I've got one. Do you? Probably. And you'll find you have one of two problems. Firstly, these guys are always chasing you. And secondly, an excessive amount of this. Now there's only one person who suffers from that second problem. Me. But in this video, I'm going to help you avoid the first problem. And in case you don't suffer from the first or the second one of these, I'll also throw in some bonus footage of when engineering testing goes a little bit wrong. So yes, I'm halfway through editing this video and I've just realised there's absolutely no context for this video if nobody's seen this project before. There's a giveaway. There. I thought it would be a good idea one day to put a twin-turbo V10 TDI, 5 litre, into a very short Nissan Patrol. And as you can see, there's quite a lot of stuff going on here. Everywhere, in fact. Absolutely everywhere. I may have gone a little bit over the top when I was building this, but now you know. Now, in case you hadn't guessed, this video is an in-depth rundown of how to get your car engineered and what you need to do in order to get that little certificate that says your car is road legal. And there are two ways of doing this. Firstly, grow a mullet, become a petulant child, and then make some demands and hope that your car gets through. Or you do it once, you get it right the first time because you followed the rules and read the instructions, and you end up with a car that's engineered properly. Now you'll probably find there are hundreds of videos about getting your car engineered and supposedly how you do it. So why should you listen to this guy instead of all the other ones that are around? Well, I have an exception. In order to become an examiner to give the mod plates for these vehicles, you have to go through a series of things. Now firstly, you have to send off what qualifications you have to Service New South Wales to have them analyse it and see if you've got the necessary experience to become a VSCCS engineer. You then have to pay your fee, naturally. After this, you have to take a written test to show that you've got the general basic knowledge about all the things like the abbreviations they use. It's not particularly difficult. You then receive a bunch of fake scenarios to fill out to show that you can actually generate a proper engineering report. You then return those engineering reports. Then you wait an incredibly long time. And finally, you get called in for an interview, and if you pass the interview, congratulations, you're now a VSCCS examiner. So, ladies and gentlemen, get your kids in the room. This means that I am 6/7 of a VSCCS engineer. Now tell them to fuck off. So anyway, that's why this video is going to give you a bit more insight than other videos might. Anyway, in case you didn't know, here's my Nissan Patrol, and here's what I've done to it. V10 twin-turbo diesel that's got about 20 times the power of the Nissan engine. GU Patrol diffs. Yes, these need engineering. A 1-inch body lift, which for some reason New South Wales absolutely hates. Electronic handbrake thing. Amongst an absolute ton of other little bits and pieces that we're going to get into later. This also includes things like a custom fuel tank, a manual to automatic conversion, as well as a petrol to diesel conversion. Now this might be an incredibly long video with an insane amount of talking, given it's my channel, and I don't really talk much because I hate it. But there's a lot of information to regurgitate, so shut up and listen. Now this is where the controversies might begin. Here's something more interesting to look at than my face. Everyone says, rule number 1 before you start doing a build, approach an engineer. And I would say you don't have to do this. What you should do is approach these regulations. That includes the ADRs that apply to your year of vehicle, the VSBs, and the vehicle specifications for your individual vehicle, because these are things to work on as a base. The ADRs give you stuff to argue should you find something that doesn't quite cross the mark, because that'll give you the definitive answer. If it matches the ADRs, then it basically matches everything else. And the VSBs are pretty much instructions. You can't go wrong if you follow those. So rather than going to an engineer straight off, check these out, make sure everything you do matches those. Because as long as it matches these, there's no real way it can fail engineering. So you've got your vehicle, you know what you want to do to it. You've checked that everything you need to do is somewhere in the VSBs or ADRs or whatever it is. And in my case, I've had to make do with all the limited space I've got available in this GQ engine bay. So my intercoolers have had to be replaced by water-to-air intercoolers. My two air boxes have had to be replaced by these horrible, crappy cartridge-style things. But you'll notice, not much else has changed. And this is incredibly important. Because as soon as you start changing things to do with emissions, that's when the testing gets so much harder. Let's bring in some long-standing controversy. I'm still using the factory ECUs, and these factory ECUs, combined with all the factory sensors which I'm using, as well as all the emissions stuff that's from the Volkswagen that's contained within the exhaust system as well as the turbos, this means that I don't need an emissions test. And this makes life a million times easier. So if you start building something, you've got yourself a Haltech ECU, a massive fuck-off turbo, unless your engineer's a little bit dodgy, you're going to have to send it for an emissions test, and it's going to have to match the standard for the vehicle that it's going into. This is where a lot of people trip up, and there's a bit of a misconception going around that people say that you can't fit an older engine to a newer car. And this is simply not the case. You can fit this as long as the emission standards meet those of the car it's going into. But in feeding the hearsay, the easiest option is to put a newer engine into an older car, simply because the newer standards are always going to be better than the older ones. Unless it's a fucking EV or something equally as gay. Now, since building this car, I've probably done about 1,500 kilometers in it. There's been a few things that I've had to sort of tweak and fix up here and there, but aside from, very basic stuff, it's gone bloody phenomenally. The coolant temperatures are great. They sit at around 90 to 92. And as we all know, 92 is half of 99. Anyway, controversial tip number whatever it is. Don't listen to Facebook and forums for any kind of engineering advice, especially the YouTube comment section, because the amount of people I've had say things like, oh, this isn't compliant, that's compliant, and I'm just sat there like, okay, especially when they end the comment with, trust me, bro. But your average morbidly obese GQ driver who sits there on Facebook because he's got no job does not trump VSBs, ADRs, and other documentation. So follow this. Don't follow this guy. Can't stress this enough. Also, just so you know, I'm not quite feeling the filming of this video because I've already filmed it once before. For some reason, Sony has a feature on its camera that lets you film in slow motion with no audio. So the majority of the footage that I filmed at the time looks like this. So whoever at Sony invented that S and Q bullshit function, I hope your mum says she's disappointed in you. So it's probably worth talking about the most troublesome thing that I had with this entire build, and that is the speedometer. And I have a few options here. Firstly, if I can somehow get the wheel speed sensor in this differential to emulate this wheel speed sensor that came out of the Touareg, then that speedo will work without any extra things happening. But let me tell you now, that's quite difficult to achieve. So, a less than ideal option is to just have a standalone speedo that runs off this speed sensor. But that poses a few setup problems. Firstly, most of these things, they come with their own sensor. And this operates on a 1 magnet pass per revolution kind of ordeal. Not many of them work with the same kind of setup that the Nissan stuff has, which I believe is something like a 48 tooth or something like that. So let's reiterate. Getting the sensors to work with it might be a bit tricky, might need a little converter board or something like that. It would be possible, might be able to work with OEM stuff. Secondly, buy an aftermarket I seem to be in a habit of saying that. Buying an aftermarket speedometer. But I'm not really happy with that because I don't like extra gauges stuck places. And the last one, which is probably the most difficult one, would be to make my own speedo from scratch. Guess which one I'm doing. And here is what I've come up with so far. This is your average LCD screen that's roughly the same size as the speedo that's already in the Touareg, coupled with Raspberry Pi goodness. And this is the 5th generation. It's essentially a tiny little computer that isn't very powerful, but it's good for doing basic things. Now, when you turn it on, you have to wait a little while. This is unfortunate. It's something I'll probably be able to code out at some point, but while it does its booting up thing, you just got to sit there and shut up. And there you go. The way I've put this together is slightly unusual. Normally what you would do with these computers is you would preload an operating system, and then it would load the operating system first, and then it would load whatever program you're making here. And I've done that in a sense, but it's got a lot of stuff going on before that happens. So this is the light version of the operating system. What that means is there's no user interface whatsoever. Everything has to be coded and loaded either by Wi-Fi, or you can do it by just coding the SD card and putting it in afterwards. That took a bit of trial and error. But all of this is done using vector. And what this means is that you tell it what shapes to make and where to put them, how thick the lines need to be and stuff like that. It's all done with maths basically, rather than drawing stuff. And that kind of follows on from what I've just said in terms of stuff it loads in the background. So it has to have a vectoring program that loads in. Then it loads in all the mathematical parameters I've done for drawing these shapes. And then it'll include stuff like the drivers for the touch screen, for example. Touch screen. Yes, it is. And the only thing I've done with it so far, because this is a bit of a hash up to try and get it through the door, is the trip counter. You can see it there, it says 0. I've only done a little bit of testing with this thing. But if I hold down this, it'll flash red, and now my trip counter's reset. But in the future, what I can do is further delve into more details with this and have it preload, say, an Android operating system into the background. And this means that, sure, I could have my speed up here, but I could swipe this way and I could have Google Maps, or swipe the other way and watch porn or something. But anyway, this is what I've decided I'm going to do. Mostly because it took an insane amount of time for me to learn how to put all this together and code a Speedo like this. It's not quite as straightforward as you'd think. Anyway, from the back side of this, all I have to do is do the data return, positive and negative for the 5-volt system to power this little board here, to which I'll be able to plug in the Nissan Patrol wheel speed sensors, because these are VR sensors, and that'll convert it then to a digital signal which can go straight into this and make that little needle move. So before test day, I will have 3D printed a tiny little enclosure for this, and then this Speedo can just sit there in the place of the original one, just like that. Now it'll be a little bit recessed because the chances are I'm going to remove this glass and just sink it right into there. So in a sense, once it's on and looking the same as that, you won't really be able to tell the difference. You will. Now I know what you're all asking. How can I get myself one of these amazing little Speedo things that's been coded by this wonderful human being you see here in front of you? Well, you learn how to code and you stop expecting handouts from the internet. And that applies to everything, because the amount of people who reach out wanting free CAD files for this car is unbelievable. Even though I haven't uploaded in about a decade, they still come in on at least a weekly basis. You're not getting any. So, voiceover time. Seeing as I'm not using the Volkswagen Touareg wheel speed sensors, I have to find a way to make something emulate these wheel speed sensors. And what do I have available? Well, the only thing I really have are the wheel speed sensors from Nissan, and these are what is called a VR wheel speed sensor. And the faster they spin, the higher the voltage they generate. Now what this basically means is that there's a metal spinning wheel and a magnetic sensor. And Volkswagen operates almost on the opposite of this. The trigger wheel on the Volkswagen is magnetic, and the sensor itself is not. And this is an ABS sensor. So what I have to do is try and get this VR wheel speed sensor to pump out the same signal as the Volkswagen ABS sensor. Now that would be very simple if it was a single wire input to the Volkswagen ECU. But Germans being Germans, they've decided to make it a 2-wire input, just to be funky. So what this means is that I have to convert my VR wheel speed sensors using a conditioning module, which will then spit out a single wire ABS signal, which I can then use a series of resistors and MOSFETs, as well as another resistor to draw up the voltage, which will eventually spit me out a 2-wire ABS signal. So that's literally the only thing this little module does. Thus giving me a speed signal and letting my Speedo work. So that's all fixed. Marvelous. I'll just add this for the interior bit because time's gone on a bit. It's dusty as shit. It's almost like I used this thing. But I've decided to put these weird pack-out things on my drawer system, because it's pretty handy to have. You can also get a little platform here with a bit of wood on it that you can just clip in, and then I can put a fridge on top of that, and my batteries are right there. Convenient. Anyway, once you're ready, you followed the instructions, you've complied with everything you have to, you can call your engineer guy. And I had my guys show up, which gave me a bit of a disadvantage because they got the use of my lovely hoist, which I'm guessing most of the time they wouldn't have. But this took about 2 hours for them to go over the vehicle, probably a bit more than that. Danny, Excellent guy. But unfortunately, he'd watched my videos, and this means that he knew absolutely everything that had been done to the car, even the things that I was trying to hide. The easy things to hide, like the GU diffs, even though they're just a bolt-in thing, and if you looked at it, you'd never tell the difference, but that's something that needs certifying. Not for a safety thing, purely because Australia. Anyway, there was a long list of stuff, and most of the stuff I knew about, they were tiny things, but here's that footage. Now, first thing on the agenda. This. And the issue is that my gearbox mount is a little bit too close to here. There's probably 2 or 3 mil there. This was a known thing before the inspection, but obviously making a little bit of a clearance there. Doesn't matter how much, because these two things don't really move, because the only way this is going to touch this is if this bearing completely decides to shit itself. So I'm just going to take a nice little cut there, get the corner off, give it maybe, I don't know, 5 or 6 mil instead of 2 or 3, and that could be considered done. There's also a bit of a test of the serviceability of the car that I've bought. Because all these brackets and mounts and stuff, they were put in a very long time ago. And a lot of stuff's been built around it. And so far, it's going pretty well. And I think if I just lop off that corner, I'll be perfectly fine. And this is because there's nothing worse than seeing painted bolts on a build, regardless of whether you see them or not. And that is hopefully the last bit of scrabbling around on my back like a peasant that I'm going to do for this entire build. Next on the agenda, fuel lines. And I don't know if you saw this in a previous video, but my fuel lines were in a shitty spot before. I had them basically running from the fuel tank over there, pretty much through this rapidly spinning device, and running down the side of the car this way. And as they stand now is exactly how they were before the preliminary inspection I just had. And this is from the engine, across the gearbox, above it, in the factory Volkswagen locations, until it comes down here and disconnects from the gearbox into the chassis, where it then joins onto modified Nissan Patrol lines. And the only topic where it needed a little bit of support was where it's bracketed from here into the back of the fuel tank. And all I'm going to do is essentially attach it to the top of the body there. I'd prefer not to, but it's probably the easiest option short of making an entire bracketing system that then has to clear the top of the diff when it's at full compression. So just for the sake of something easy, I'm just going to do that. And the only reason I'm hesitant to do that rather than keeping it clipped somewhere on the chassis is because the whole purpose of designing this car the way it is was so that I could very easily remove the body from the chassis. And if you're some kind of lunatic and watched all of these videos, you'll see that's exactly true, because all the wiring is inside the body, all of the structural stuff is kept to the chassis, there is one protrusion where the wiring meets the gearbox from inside the body, and there's about 4 connectors in the engine bay. So essentially, I have to disconnect 4 connectors in the engine bay, 2 connectors there, remove the body mounts, and this will come off. And now I have to remove 1 bracket from a fuel line. God damn it. Top tip. If you absolutely douse your Rivnut with paint before you put it in, then you don't need to paint the side of your holes. And it means you're not left with a massive splodge of mismatched coloured paint afterwards. How wonderful. So the last little bit will be this little P-clip with this kind of modified rubber bush thing from the fuel lines. That goes in there. The fuel lines go in there. And then I bolt it to the fucking body. And the fact that I now have to remove that extra bolt to remove my body is going to live in my head rent-free for a very long time. Next on the agenda. At full lock, my tyre was too close to the mudguard. With a bit of this, and this, it's now not too close to the tyre on full lock. And throughout the full range of travel, I don't think it gets closer than 2 inches away, which is a good thing. And obviously this is at full droop, so as the suspension moves up and down, this is the closest it's ever going to get. As long as there's some weight on this tyre, it'll push it up and therefore further away from this mudguard. This is done. Exhaust stuff. Now as this is now, everything is at full droop, so everything is as close to each other as it's ever going to get. And there's about a 10mm gap between my shock shroud surround thing and the exhaust here. Now this was flagged up because during certain movements, I guess, if this moved slightly tweaked to the side, it could touch the exhaust. And the same applies to this side on the fuel tank. There's a good inch or so of clearance there, but I've been advised to put some heat shielding around here to sort of, you know, give a little bit of heat dissipation around there. So my plan is simple. The length of the heat shield I need needs to be almost exactly as long as this random little offcut of 3.5 inch exhaust I happened to find on my shelf. What I also happened to find on my shelf is this lovely bit of OEM Volkswagen heat shielding. I wonder what I can do with this. And there you have it. Random little shitty heat shield made from things that I found on the shelf. Does it fit? Of course it bloody does. Haven't even tried it and I know it's going to fit. And there you go. Sure, it closes up the gap a little bit on that shock thing, but it's going to dissipate the heat much better. And the same thing applies on the fuel tank side. Perspective is playing havoc here. It's not actually looking that shit. Let's try a different angle. That's probably a better angle. You can see that it's, you know, nicely there between the fuel tank and whatever. Same on the shock side. And that'll do me. Clearance between this exhaust pipe and this cross member is a little bit tight. If you pull down on it, it'll hit. Now this one should be incredibly simple because it's all sort of clamped together. I can essentially loosen these clamps, give it a little tweak like that, which will then raise up everything south of it. The other thing I can do is reinforce this exhaust bracket, which will also bring everything up a little bit. But as per usual, you do the bare minimum, see if it works. If it doesn't work, then you do a little bit more. So I'm going to do that. Clearanced. Don't worry, we're getting there. We're about 70% of the way through this list, and it hasn't been that hard so far. Shut up, wind. Don't worry, we're well past the halfway mark of doing random garbage stuff that isn't interesting at all for the sake of getting a little sticker on my car. The next point of interest is down there somewhere. And these ones are probably quite blindingly obvious. Holes in your firewall, not exactly a good thing to have. And these are naturally occurring ones, thankfully, because I've had to remove my clutch pedal because I don't have a clutch anymore. And then that's the thing that had the quick disconnect for my rear sway bar. And for some of you, you might think that's the hardest part, but for me, it's the easiest, because I've got fully sick machines. And there they are, weird little firewall blank things. These were bloody horrendous to fit. That one was fine. You're a little bastard. So now that that's out of the way and everything's rectified, the fun begins. Now the compulsory testing I had to do, because New South Wales for some reason makes you do a brake test if your engine exceeds 20% of the original power, regardless of whether the brakes have been changed or not, I had to go through this rigmarole to get my car certified. Now you can look up the New South Wales brake testing manual to give you all the details you'd need, but basically you're doing various speeds and then stopping as quickly as you can. And there are a few aspects of this. One of them is straight line stopping, the other one is trying to get some heat into your brakes to make sure they cope and don't fade when they get too hot. And seeing as we were there, and I'd paid to rent the facility, we figured we may as well do all the other stuff as well. So this included the Swerve test. And for this one, the car got loaded up to its maximum GVM. And from here, the speeds gradually increased until you get to 100 kilometers an hour, and then you do the lane change. Now what you've got to keep in mind is that this car is over 30 years old. It was never a good handling car in the first place. So once you get to the fully loaded speed of 100 kilometers an hour, and then try to do a high-speed lane change, it doesn't always go entirely to plan. But anyway, seeing as I'm essentially an apprentice in this situation, I ended up doing a few runs through in my own car on this Swerve test, just to get a feel for how it feels. Let's just say I'm a little bit too precious about this car, because I didn't do it very fast.
I didn't realise how slow I was going until I got to the end. I think I saw 50 on that. It's pathetic.
Yeah, no, good.
But yeah, I suppose like as they're coming up to you, it's quite scary. But then once you're in there, it's like, oh, this is okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it's cool.
It feels good.
Yeah.
You want to have another crack at it?
I'll give it another go. Yeah, I'll give it a bit more berries.
Alright, go.
I can see why you enjoy doing these tests now. That was only 70 though.
Yeah, okay.
Well, that last one you did was 100, right? Fucking hell.
Yeah, so you know about it.
Yeah.
Anyway, the icing on the cake was a sound test, because while I've kept all my emissions stuff, this sound test had to be performed on a drive-by situation. There's two types of tests. The one for my category of vehicle is accelerating between two traffic cones, at a set distance and from a set speed. So, car was inspected. The things that found wrong with it were rectified. It's been tested. It passed the tests. Now what do? You wait. And then you wait some more. And then you wait just a little bit longer. And while you're waiting, you use it as a nice little segue to answer your questions for extra filler content. So firstly, what is the hardest part? Getting it to fit or getting all the things you need to fit to it after it's installed in said tiny car? To be honest, I made this build much more complicated than it had to be. And in a way, that's been the downfall of the project. Because when I started this project, turns out a lot of people wanted to start the project, but they were too scared. And once they found out that the engine fitted, they started their projects. And theirs finished before mine, just because I went too far with it. But in all honesty, I would say that none of it was particularly hard. I'd say the most time-consuming thing was the wiring, but that's because I did stupid stuff with it. I wanted to keep the KESI system and all the security stuff so that it's not easy to steal and nobody can start it without the actual key. But it's easy enough to get these things running with just an ECU and a few wires. The only trouble you come to if you do that is getting the automatic stuff and all the modules to work properly. But that's a side issue because I've done it my way and it works beautifully. How long can you keep it rev max until something breaks? It's a diesel, it revs to like 200 RPM, it's never going to break. What is the purpose of it? Street car, track car, 4B? All of the above, I don't know. I haven't really decided yet. I haven't done any hard off-roading with it, obviously. I'm too precious about it, even though the paintwork's shit. I don't want to get it scratched up, so yeah, once I get the first scratch, then I'll just destroy it. When is it going to see some dirt? It already has, technically. I mean, not a lot, but enough to be considered dirt. Could this engine ever be used in a standalone harness? Is it worth the trouble? It's one of my favourite engines ever. Mine too. It could very easily be used as a standalone harness. This engine will start, it won't do anything else, it'll run and rev maybe, it won't have any of the auxiliaries working, but if you just have the ECUs wired up and trigger that starter motor, it'll pretty much start. You'd probably have to do some bypassing of the KESI units, but that's a pretty easy thing to do. I mean, a KESI unit is essentially a bunch of MOSFETs controlled by a computer, so bypass those, it's probably twisting a couple of wires together. Yeah, it would be very easy to get it running in a standalone situation. How many kilometers on the motor when you pulled it from the Touareg? Quite a lot. It was at about 300,000 kilometers. How long are you going to keep it for? Hope we can see some trips in it. You might not see some trips in it, but I'm probably going to keep it for quite a while, unless it gets crashed or completely destroyed or just blows up spectacularly. You don't really sink this much time into a project and then end up selling it, because firstly, you'll never make your money back because nobody wants to buy anyone else's project. And secondly, why should I go through all the hard effort just to let someone else enjoy it? It's like not fucking your girlfriend for the next guy. Same as Andrew. Who's Andrew? Maybe we'll find out soon. How to go about the engineering, etc. Also, what's the plan for it now? Will it be a camping rig? Well, I hope this video has explained the engineering side of that question. Will it be a camping rig? Probably. I'm trying to find a nice sort of roof platform to put on this so I could maybe put my rooftop tent on it. I've got my eye on one of those carbon fiber 36 kilogram tents to chuck on it to see how that goes, because that would be quite nice. But I've got a few trips to go on in it before stuff happens. I don't know, see what happens, I guess. Would you make custom parts to the public? This entire car is in CAD. I get this question every single bloody week. So what I'm going to do is just make everything available to download. There'll be a video in the link thing on the comment, or the video description anyway. So you can just basically build your own, because I'm fed up with people asking, where are wheelies? To be honest, this car struggles for traction as it is. If it was rear-wheel drive only, I'm sure it would probably do something similar, but right now it just lights up the front wheels, and because it's open diffs, maybe if I had lockers actually, yeah. I didn't realize this before I built this car, but it's got a very weird transfer case system. It's all-wheel drive, obviously, and when you put it in low range, it's low range with some kind of automatically engaging center diff lock, and that's a bit of a struggle to set up, but I'm sure I'll get it eventually. But if that does happen, I don't know, I'm rambling about rubbish now. I've been dying to see this beast on some tracks or just touring and showing off. I think my biggest question would be, if you sold her, how much do you think she's worth all up? It's a pipe dream, but if I win the lotto tonight. Would you ever consider building custom cars as a career? As for the touring and showing off thing, the amount of attention this thing gets is bloody unreal. I had no idea so many people watched this channel, but literally every time I stop for fuel, I'll have someone approach me and be like, oh yeah, I've seen this. If you sold her, how much do you think she's worth all up? You can't really get your money back on something like this. Anything south of 100 grand I wouldn't even consider, and that's an insane price. And it's simply because, not so much the parts that I've put into it, all up it's probably cost around 25k, but it's the time that you never get back. It's 3 years of your life. I don't know what percentage of your life that is, but if you think about it that way, you can only build so many of these before you die, and I'm not gonna sell out for cash on that. Would you ever consider building custom cars as a career? I get asked this quite a lot. I'm sure some of you are aware, because a lot of you have bought these, but I make various four-wheel drive parts for 76 series, Nissan Patrols, things like that. And I sort of have quality anxiety, if that makes sense. So even before I send out a product, I'll always be worried, is this person satisfied with it? So if you upscale that to an entire vehicle, there's no way that I'd be at a stage where I'd feel happy with what I was delivering to someone. I mean, this thing's good enough for me. This thing meets my standards and it works bloody perfectly, but you know, I wouldn't build it for someone else. Did you need to do foreplay before putting the engine in, or did you slam it straight in? You can ask Jay Muse about that. Great videos. You had a lot of challenges in this build. What was the hardest thing or things to get right? A lot of it was, as I said before, the wiring. That was pretty horrendous, mostly because of how I chose to do it. The other thing was the coding of the modules. And there's no information available about this, so you kind of have to figure it out for yourself. There's nothing published. It's all sort of pattern recognition and coding. It's a very strange thing. I'm hesitant to even call it coding, because it's not really writing any code. It's more like a string, no, not a string, a series of numbers, and each number represents a different function on various vehicles, and you have to find the corresponding module that works with that particular category, and it's a bit of a clusterfuck, to be honest. It got there in the end, and there were some things that I managed to code out that I never thought I would be able to code out. For example, the airbags and the ABS systems and stuff. But yeah. My question would be regarding the suitability of the V10 into the Y60, Y61 platform, now that you've done it. Do you consider it to be a good option compared to other options, Cummins, Duramax, blah, blah, blah? Okay, this is something that's going to be quite surprising. You think, oh, V10 twin turbo, it must be absolutely hectic. But Volkswagen is, maybe a luxury car kind of thing, at least more than a Nissan Patrol anyway. You can drive this thing so it is the most smooth and comfortable thing in the world, but then on the flip side, you can just move your foot a few degrees and you're shot back into your seat and you're spinning rubber. So it's all dependent on how you drive it. And the thing that has surprised me the most is the fuel economy. Thanks, truck. Now at the moment I'm currently in the process of calibrating my Speedo, so how I've done my fuel economy is by using Google Maps, doing an exact route, and so far over 71 kilometers, and this is doing Old Pacific Highway up and down a few mountains and stuff, not at high speeds, but you know, you've got a lot of gear switching, a lot of different elevations and stuff. and I filled up before I began, and I filled up at the end, and I put in 4.3 litres over 71 kilometres. That works out as 6 litres per 100, or if you idiots do it that way. I've ridden motorbikes that are less fuel efficient than that, and I'm sure if I plant my foot and spin wheels and do all sorts of funny things, it'll skyrocket to the moon. But if you're just cruising around casually on B roads or motorway speeds and doing whatever, you're less than 10 litres per kilometre. That's insane for one of these. So that means with this 100 or 105 litre fuel tank that I've got, I'm getting well over 1,000 kilometres out of that. With this, I never expected that, to be honest. Would you do it again? And what would you do differently if you did? In terms of what would I do differently? Probably nothing. Maybe learn to paint. But would I do it again? Probably not. I have sort of thought about what would happen if I just woke up and it hadn't been built yet, but I've still got both of the cars just sat in like in episode 1, and I'd just be like, nah, that just wouldn't happen. It's not worth the time and effort. Maybe more on the engineering process. Correct way to go about things. Are engineers hard to find? Are they happy to give advice before even starting a project? Paid, of course. Price ranges, as no two cars are the same, just a thought. Engineers are not hard to find. If you go on the VSCCS thing, you'll find a list of everyone who's qualified as a certification engineer, for want of a better word. Everyone I've spoken to is pretty happy to give the advice, but obviously I'm sure they're all happy to give advice before the project begins, but it'll have to be a general case. I mean, going back to what I was saying before, the only real important thing is going through all those documents. I'm probably too lazy to put those up, but you can skip back in the video if you want to see that. Price ranges, as no two cars are the same. From my perspective, this engineering was insanely expensive. Almost to the stage of, if I still had the old engine, I would have just got a dodgy blue slip and just been driving this as it is, because it cost more than either of the donor cars. I mean, I think it cost $4,070 to get this thing just certified. I mean, to me, that's mental. The fine you'd get if you're caught defected is less than a quarter of that. So get caught 4 times and then you've paid for engineering, or, you know. And the other thing is, depending on whether Chief Inspector Dickhead's boyfriend sucked him off that morning, he can undo all that in a second if he wants to. So it doesn't really count for anything. So yeah, anyway, rambling again. It was very expensive, but I'm legal. So, you know, that's all that matters, right? This guy asks, personally, I'd like to see how it performs off-road and maybe a tow test. I don't think it's going to be much of a tow vehicle, to be honest. It's a short wheelbase patrol. It's limited by whatever it was out of factory. What can it tow out of factory? Maybe like 3 tons, maybe? I don't know. Whatever is on the RVDs, you can look that up yourselves. How it performs off-road. I reckon it'll be pretty good off-road, to be honest. I've got 3-inch shocks in this, which mean that it droops a little bit more, but it doesn't have the up travel because I've maintained it at a relatively stock height. But now it's on 33s, or 285s. And because it's got the GU diffs, that means that it's got the factory rear vacuum diff locker. So essentially it'll go pretty much the same as any other patrol with a rear diff locker. And maybe more so because maybe it's a controversial thought, but I think cars drive much better when they've got the biggest tyres they have and the lowest lift. Better than these cars that drive around with the 6-inch plus thing, jelly rolling around on all the corners with their 37-inch tyres, and then wondering why they almost flip over on a roundabout. So yeah, I reckon it'll do really nicely for the sort of driving that I do. Anyway, that's it for questions. I recently bought a watch. Now I've got a bus to catch. There will be no more videos. So there you have it. One fully road legal, twin-turbo V10 Nissan Patrol. And yes, you did hear that right. There will be no more videos. Because frankly, I hate making them. Maybe I'll be back in several years, maybe not, who knows. But that's all I'm going to upload. So feel free to share your disdain in the comments below, because I won't give a shit. But there is one final thing that has to be done.